Her groom left her at the altar. Then a Mafia boss arrived with 700 armed guards. The wedding hall shimmered beneath golden chandeliers, echoing with soft laughter and the hum of an orchestra playing love songs that seemed to promise forever. Every guest turned their eyes toward the aisle, where the bride stood radiant in her white gown, her heart beating like a drum beneath layers of lace. For her, this was supposed to be the beginning of a fairy tale, the moment where love triumphed and promises became eternal. But as she stood at the altar, waiting for her groom to appear, something in the air felt wrong. The music slowed. The whispers began. The doors stayed closed. Minutes passed, then an hour, and still no sign of him. A wave of unease rippled through the crowd as murmurs turned into cruel jokes. Her hands began to tremble, the warmth in her cheeks replaced by a cold, hollow feeling. The photographers who had come to capture joy now lowered their cameras awkwardly, unsure whether to stay or leave. Her father couldn't meet her eyes, and her friends avoided her gaze entirely. Then, suddenly, her phone buzzed in her hand. One message, just 4 words that shattered everything. "I can't do this." Her throat closed up as she read it again, hoping she had misread. But the truth was there. Her groom had abandoned her, walking out of her life at the very altar where he promised to begin it. A gasp spread through the hall. Some guests looked away in pity. Others whispered with judgment. Tears blurred her vision as she stood frozen, the symbol of heartbreak in a room once filled with dreams. Then, just as the silence turned unbearable, a deep rumbling sound echoed from outside. Engines, dozens of them. The ground seemed to tremble as black SUVs rolled to a stop in front of the venue, their windows tinted, their presence commanding. Guests rushed to the windows, confusion and fear replacing curiosity. The heavy doors of the vehicles opened in perfect synchronization, and men in dark suits stepped out, tall, serious, and armed. They moved with precision, forming a silent line that led to one last car, larger, sleeker, and surrounded by guards. The air thickened as its door opened, and out stepped a man whose reputation alone could silence a city. The infamous Mafia boss, known for his power and ruthlessness, now walked toward the wedding hall. No one understood why he was there or what he wanted. Every guest fell silent as he entered, his footsteps echoing on the marble floor. Then his gaze locked onto the broken bride, standing beneath the altar lights, her face pale but proud. Without a word, he began walking toward her. Whispers turned to gasps as everyone moved aside. The boss stopped before her, his voice low but commanding as he said, "No one leaves a woman like you standing alone." And in that single sentence, the night transformed from tragedy into something no one would ever forget. The guests rushed toward the windows as the roar of engines filled the air. One after another, black SUVs lined the entrance, their tires screeching against the marble driveway. The heavy doors of the vehicles swung open, and men in dark suits stepped out, tall, disciplined, and carrying an energy that silenced the crowd. Their faces were unreadable, their movements perfectly synchronized, as if trained for moments far more dangerous than this. Every step they took toward the entrance echoed through the wedding hall, spreading unease through every guest. Whispers filled the air, and people began to question what was happening. The bride, still standing frozen at the altar, turned slowly, her tears drying on her cheeks as confusion replaced heartbreak. Then the last SUV arrived, larger, darker, and different from the rest. Its door opened slowly, and a man stepped out, exuding power with every movement. The moment his shoes touched the ground, silence fell. The infamous Mafia boss had arrived, the same man whose name sent chills through boardrooms, courtrooms, and back alleys. His black suit shimmered under the lights, and his cold, calm expression held more weight than 1,000 threats. Surrounded by armed guards, he walked toward the building with the authority of someone who owned it. The guests moved aside without being told. No one dared to speak, breathe, or even blink too loudly. When he entered the hall, the air changed. Heavier, colder, filled with an unspoken tension. The bride's trembling hands clutched her bouquet as his sharp gaze found her across the room. He didn't say a word at first. He just watched her, long enough for every person present to feel the storm of emotions in the silence between them. Then he nodded to his men, and they closed the doors behind him, sealing the hall from the outside world. Panic rippled through the crowd as people realized they were surrounded by over 100 guards. Still, the Mafia boss remained calm. His steps echoed on the marble floor as he approached the altar where she stood, heartbroken and humiliated. The closer he got, the quieter the whispers became. Then, standing just a few feet away, he reached inside his coat and pulled out a small black velvet box. The entire room watched in stunned silence as he opened it, revealing a ring that sparkled brighter than the chandeliers above. His deep voice cut through the tension like thunder. "No one," he said, his gaze locked on her, "leaves a woman like you standing alone." The words echoed through the hall, leaving everyone breathless. The bride blinked in disbelief, unsure if she was dreaming or trapped in a moment beyond reason. Around them, the guards stood still like statues guarding their king, while the guests dared not move. The Mafia boss extended his hand toward her, his expression softening just enough to reveal something human beneath the power. The entire hall waited in stunned silence, knowing this night would never be forgotten. With every step he took toward her, the tension in the air thickened like smoke. The guests stood frozen, unable to comprehend what was happening before their eyes. The bride's trembling hands clutched her bouquet, her heart racing as the powerful man approached. His presence carried a gravity that silenced even the faintest whispers. When he finally reached her, he stopped, his dark eyes softening just enough to show something no one expected. Respect. Slowly, he reached into his coat and took out the black velvet box. He opened it, revealing a diamond ring that shimmered under the golden lights of the hall. Without hesitation, he took her hand, his touch steady and firm, and slid the ring onto her finger. Gasps filled the air, and flashes from the cameras lit the room like lightning. His voice, deep and commanding, broke the silence. "From this moment on," he said, "you are not alone. You are under my protection." Every word carried the weight of his reputation. A man known for ruling empires built in shadows now pledging loyalty to a woman who had just been left broken at the altar. The guests looked on in disbelief, some too scared to move, others too awed to breathe. The bride's eyes filled with tears, her pain mixing with shock and a strange sense of safety she couldn't explain. Then, with a subtle motion of his hand, he gave a signal to his guards. Within seconds, the entire venue was surrounded by 700 armed men, each standing at attention in perfect formation. Their synchronized movement sent a shiver down every spine in the room. They raised their weapons in salute not to their boss but to her, the woman he had just vowed to protect. The message was clear. She was now untouchable. Outside, the sound of sirens began to fade as even law enforcement hesitated to interfere. Meanwhile, the once absent groom, pale and panicked, tried to sneak back into the hall after hearing the commotion. But before he could take 2 steps, the guards seized him, dragging him to the front of the room where he was thrown to his knees before the Mafia boss. The bride turned, her expression torn between anger and disbelief. The boss looked down at the cowardly man, his voice calm but sharp as steel. "You thought you could humiliate her," he said softly, almost whispering. "You only humiliated yourself." The groom stammered, unable to speak, his eyes darting between the guards and the floor. The boss tilted his head slightly, then gave a single nod. His men stepped back, releasing the groom, but not the fear that gripped him. "Go," the boss said firmly, "and never look back." The groom stumbled to his feet, his face drained of color, and ran out of the hall as everyone watched in silence. In that moment, every witness knew they had seen something extraordinary. The day a broken bride found strength in the most unexpected protector, and a coward lost everything in front of the world. As the chaos faded into silence, the hall remained filled with stunned faces and flashing cameras. The bride stood motionless, still trying to understand what had just unfolded before her eyes. Her tears had dried, replaced by a quiet strength that seemed to rise from somewhere deep within her. The Mafia boss turned toward her, his sharp expression softening for the first time that night. His voice was low, calm, and steady as he said, "You deserve loyalty, not weakness." The words struck her harder than any betrayal could. Then he continued, his tone gentler but commanding. "If no one else will stand by you, I will." For a moment, she couldn't breathe. The same man whose name was feared across the city now stood before her, offering not power, but protection. Slowly, he extended his arm toward her. The crowd watched, speechless as she hesitated, her mind torn between disbelief and gratitude. Finally, she reached out and placed her trembling hand on his arm. In that instant, the entire room seemed to shift. The murmurs stopped. The fear disappeared. Every guest, every photographer, every critic who had once pitied her now stood in silent awe. The woman who had been humiliated minutes ago was now walking down the aisle beside the most powerful man anyone had ever known. They didn't walk as lovers. They walked as equals bound by an unexpected twist of fate. Cameras flashed around them, capturing what would soon become the most talked-about moment in the city. The two walked past the guests, their steps calm and unhurried, while his guards stood in perfect formation, saluting them both. The once empty altar now held a meaning no one could define. Not a broken promise, but a rebirth. Outside the hall, the night was alive with whispers as news spread like wildfire. By morning, every headline carried her story. The bride left at the altar, saved by the city's most feared man. People speculated endlessly about their connection. Some called it destiny, others called it a deal, but those who had been there that night knew the truth ran deeper. Beneath the power, beneath the chaos, there was something unspoken between them. A silent understanding forged in heartbreak and courage. In the weeks that followed, she didn't hide from the world. She carried herself with a quiet confidence, and he, true to his word, stood behind her in silence, ensuring no one dared to humiliate her again. Their bond was never defined by words or romance, but by the unshakable respect between two souls who had both known pain and learned to rise above it. And though the city remembered it as the night the Mafia boss claimed the abandoned bride, those who looked closer saw something far greater. The night a broken heart found strength and a feared man found purpose.